Hello, it is I, Dr. Brian Lorgon 111. It's been a while, but with the 1 year anniversary of Void Stranger's release, I thought we were due for another one of these videos. And for anyone who is not aware, I've already made 8 prior bonus videos about Void Stranger, and you can find that playlist in this video's description. Today's topic is the prior art that Void Stranger borrows from, and we'll touch on various works that may be the origin of some of the artwork present in Void Stranger. And all the usual spoiler warnings apply. You know the drill by now. So let's get started. Void Stranger is a game that borrows heavily from prior works. Yeah, we'll get to you. In prior lore videos, I've done some deep dives to analyze, for example, how the game's structure is based on Dante's Inferno, or how certain characters use archetypes from Berserk. But today, rather than focusing on story or structure, I'll be discussing the artwork of Void Stranger, both in terms of the video gameplay, but also especially the many still images that we see throughout the game. And I guess since it's on the screen right now, we should touch again on the game's logo, which depicts a labyrinth. Back in my original recap video, I already discussed how in Dante's Inferno, King Minos, who was the judge of souls in the underworld, in life had built the original labyrinth of myth to trap the Minotaur inside it. So Labyrinth makes a good logo for a game where the player is winding their way through a convoluted stream of puzzles. But also, the 8-pointed shape of Void Stranger's logo perhaps also alludes to the Buddhist Eightfold Path that I had previously discussed in my Void Stranger Samsara video. Continuing with the Dante's Inferno theme, another notable art piece of Void Stranger is the Gates to Dis. It's a pivotal location hidden away behind the game's largest meta-puzzles that leads to the Trail of Traitors, which arguably describes treachery, the ninth circle of Dante's Hell. The art on the doorway itself is clearly an allusion to Rodin's Gates of Hell. Rodin might be best known for The Thinker, a familiar statue of a pensive man with chin resting on his hand. But many people do not know that The Thinker, as well as a number of other Rodin sculptures, were originally made for portions of Rodin's immense Gates of Hell work, which was inspired by Dante's Inferno. Rodin would work on the Gates of Hell, on and off, throughout the entire second half of his life, and many of the individual sculptures that decorated the door would be enlarged by Rodin and made into separate art pieces, like The Thinker. Another place Void Stranger has lots of intricate pixel art is in the pause menu. The controls menu, for example, features the Chamber of Hell, a Manetti woodcut used to illustrate Dante's Inferno. Similarly, the graphics menu features Satan eating Brutus, Cassius, and Judas, as described in Dante's own description in Inferno, and is pictured in various illustrations of the work. The language menu depicts the Tower of Babel, which is appropriate since that's an origin myth for why the people of the world speak different languages. And once again, we can see direct inspiration for the pixel art from works of antiquity. It is noteworthy that building the tower was an example of the sin of pride described in Dante's Inferno. And as an aside, Sif calls B a Nimrod when seeing B's notes left in the empty burden boxes, and Nimrod was the biblical leader who commissioned the Tower of Babel. Is this an example of Sif projecting? The back menu option is a little more mysterious. It pictures intertwining staircases, perhaps vaguely reminiscent of an M.C. Escher piece, or alluding to helical strands of DNA. A similar staircase appears at the start of Void Stranger's release trailer, though the staircases there are broken at the bottom. I think there's a lot of possible interpretations here. Just to name one, walking the stairs of the pause menu would put you in an endless loop, like Samsara, and the depiction of the broken stairs at the start of the release trailer illustrates the enlightened end of the previous game, Zero Ranger, with the cycle broken, leading into the new universe of Void Stranger. The Quit Game menu option depicts a memento mori illustration, a common art motif illustrating man's own mortality. but it was pointed out that this particular illustration originates from the cover of a work called The History and the Various Parts of the Human Body, published for the use of beginners by Solomon Albert, Doctor of Medicine and Public Professor of the same, a text from 1585. The Greek on the bottom of the text cover translates to Know Thyself. The Burdens menu is an interesting one. It was pointed out to me a while ago that the shade summoning tile in-game is the alchemical symbol of the Philosopher's Stone, a circle inscribed in a square, inscribed in a triangle, inscribed in a circle. And those four elements combine into the alchemical recipe for immortality. Meanwhile, the Burdens menu depicts the three symbols of the alchemical primes, sulfur, mercury, and salt, which symbolize soul, spirit, and body. And perhaps we see the Void Rod creating an alchemical reaction in the scene of Ad's resurrection in Dis. It is perhaps notable that the upgraded Void Rod itself, with its wings, looks a bit like the Staff of Mercury. The Memories menu is perhaps the most perplexing. It looks like two halves of a brain, but the right half is more like the branches of a withered birch tree, surrounded by sparkly memory bubbles or something. Similar branches or tendrils appear in some other places, such as the outer space background of Dis, the edges of some special brands, and in the next artwork we'll consider in a moment. But if you have thoughts on how to interpret this bit of art, I'm interested to hear them. Moving on from just the game menus, when entering Dis, we witness the per aspera ad astra picture, which is Latin for through adversity to the stars, a phrase commonly used in logos of various organizations. It was pointed out that this particular illustration, however, comes directly from a book called Finland in the 19th Century, and recall that the Void Stranger developers are Finnish. The weird thing floating in the background during Gray's final brains, which I referred to in my playthrough as a carpet, was pointed out to actually be an egg cell, perhaps foreshadowing of Gray learning of Lily's pregnancy. It was pointed out to me that when the game crashes, you see a screen kind of like this, that mostly comprises garbled versions of the tiles on screen during the crash, but also features a few extra tiles, and if you reassemble those extra tiles, you get this, which perhaps resembles a little dragony Lev idol and part of an eclipse. Kinda weird stuff to find living in Dis's scrambled computer memory. I had mentioned in a prior video another artwork. If you score high enough in Zerost Ranger to unlock IF mode, then in Lev's boss transformation, you get to see this, which is Michelangelo's Last Judgment. So there's a bunch of examples of where Void Stranger borrows from old works of art, but in addition to those historical works, Void Stranger also takes advantage of modern media, like video games and anime. I myself am not very familiar with most of these references, but here are some more that have been pointed out by various folks in the community. Evangelion. One of the Steam background images, called Descent, looks a lot like the second impact from Evangelion. And Sif's animal form looks a lot like the atom embryonic form of life in Evangelion. Gunbuster. Sif's crossed arms, both in their B-198 statue, as well as in their boss battle, are reminiscent of the gunbuster pose used in a number of Gainax anime. Radiant Silvergun. The opening cutscene of Void Stranger, with the impact on Earth revealing the System Erasure logo, looks very much like a cutscene in Radiant Silvergun, and the overall stories of both games have a lot in common. Cave Noir. Cave Noir is a Game Boy game that has some obvious influences on the main Sokoban gameplay layout of Void Stranger, with similar game style and heads-up display. Link's Awakening. But of course, I had to save the best for last, as the game which Void Stranger borrows from the most is Link's Awakening. Art, animation, gameplay ideas, dialogue, and theming are all borrowed from the first Zelda game made for a handheld console. Let's take a look at a few of the obvious connections. When bosses power up, the 8-direction animation is the same as when Link obtains one of the instruments in Link's Awakening. The cutscene from the end of Act 3, where Sif wakes Bee on the beach, is a copy of Marin waking Link on the beach. And the subsequent Void Stranger startup screen again has Sif and Bee mimicking Marin and Link. The Floor Master boss that you fight in the smelly hole in Void Stranger is basically the boss of the Face Palace, baby! The animation style of your character falling into the void in Void Stranger is the same as Link falling into a hole in Link's Awakening. The much-repeated text, "Don't ask how I know," from the knowledgeable rock eggs, is a nice homage to all the informative, identical children in Link's Awakening who end their dialogue with, "Don't ask me what that means, I'm just a kid." In Link's Awakening, you can steal from the shopkeeper, but then if you return to the shop, he gets angry and insta-kills you. And in Void Stranger EX, Shopkeeper Mon gives the player the same fate when Mimic Gray tries to take a shortcut without paying for Mon's shortcut tip. The framing of the story of Link's Awakening is that everything that takes place inside the game was a dream of the Windfish, and wakening them by playing the song with all the instruments would end that dream. And the themes of dreams and awakening are ever present throughout Void Stranger. Just to quickly quote a few lines of dialogue. "Only bitter dreams of the waking world await you now. As the future emperor of this waking world, I would love to have had you beside me. And so you'll leave this waking world. Your grasp of this waking world weakens." And various NPCs throughout the game, and even Lily, think that the Void Tower might be just a dream. The list of dream references goes on and on. And so, while Void Stranger is its own creative masterpiece, it clearly draws inspiration from many past works. See the video description for a lot of links to learn more on your own. But Void Stranger plays special homage to Link's Awakening among all the other references. Did I miss other references? Probably. Feel free to point out other things that I've missed in the comments. This video is less in-depth and analytical than most of my prior videos in this series, as there were just so many references, many of which I myself am relatively unfamiliar with. So thanks to many folks on the Unofficial System Erasure Discord, whose conversations helped inform a lot of the material here. Once again, if you'd like to see deeper dives into the lore and certain references in Void Stranger, check out the prior videos in my Void Stranger Story and Lore playlist. I am Dr. Brian Lorgon 111, and I hope you're having a great day.